how close is the relationship between Fox News and the Koch brothers? Well, it's closer than you might think. There's a report from Media Matters for America that highlights the ties between Fox News hosts and Koch-funded groups such as Americans for Prosperity and the Americans for Prosperity Foundation. Now, there's the difference between those two, and I'll get to that. Of course, Americans for Prosperity, as you know, or might not know, is a 501c4 group, which the IRS considers a social welfare group. Interesting. While, of course, the AFP Foundation is a 501c3, both of them, of course, don't have to disclose their donors and how much they've received from said donors. They, of course, spend millions of dollars on conservative advocacy and elections. They run ads against healthcare reform, renewable energy, the minimum wage, etc. And they also run ads against Democrats. Now, memos from Americans for Prosperity reported to Politico show that AFP plans to spend at least $125 million this year. Obviously, midterms are coming up, and the latest polls show that Republicans could win a majority in the Senate. Now, that's very problematic, of course. So let's compare that a little bit to groups supporting Democrats, and you'll find no equal. Politico reporter Kenneth Vogel writes, quote, AFP's $125 million projected 2014 budget alone would also exceed the total 2012 fundraising hauls of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the National Republican Congressional Committee, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, or the National Republican Senatorial Committee. All of those committees combined, the Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, will outspend them in 2014. Amazing. This is a lot of money being thrown around. Speaking of the money and who has it, Republicans have the money advantage. But they also have another advantage, and that is their media presence. Now here on the left, we have a problem with media coverage. Let's do a comparison. Let's compare the largest conservative and the largest liberal conventions side by side. You've got, on the right, you've got CPAC, right? And it gets a lot of media coverage. And I would like to guess that some of that comes from liberals, right? Because we love to watch it and we love to judge the crazy. But also CPAC gets touted a lot on Fox News. Now let's compare that to the recent Netroots Nation conference that took place in my home state of Michigan, in Detroit. That almost had no coverage, especially when you consider the mainstream media or the corporate media. Now, do you see the comparison here? CPAC gets a lot of big conservative names and politicians. Well, while Netroots, they got Elizabeth Warren, which isn't bad, right? You know, we all love Elizabeth Warren here. Joe Biden, and Michigan gubernatorial candidate Mark Schauer. But that's it. You see the problem there? Is that most of the Democratic politicians, except for those three, they didn't even bother to show up at Netroots, the biggest progressive conference, and almost nobody shows up. That's a problem. Because if there's no Democrats, there's no media. If there's no media, nobody pays attention. That's a problem. And speaking of conferences and media, we come to why they're intertwined with the Koch brothers and Americans for Prosperity. So this report in Media Matters states the Koch/Fox News events are aimed at rallying attendees to support conservative causes and fight progressive initiatives. Well, no kidding. A good example of this is when Tucker Carlson was featured in an AFP event designed to send a message to the left about free markets. And an event with John Stossel called the, and get this is hilarious, the Hands Off My Healthcare Rally to fight in health insurance reform. The Hands Off My Healthcare Rally. That's a little ironic, right? I always find it sort of funny when people with insurance think that somehow helping other people who can't afford to get insurance actually get it will somehow lead to them losing their own. Funny how that works. Anyway, Americans for Prosperity promotional material heavily touts this relationship between AFP and Fox News, and at least 15 different Fox News hosts have been involved in American for Prosperity events since 2012. And those hosts are more than happy to defend Americans for Prosperity and the Kochs from all different types of criticism, and also to promote AFP ads and events. For example,
Louisiana Senator Mary Landrieu is one of the most vulnerable Democrats, and today, Americans for Prosperity released a devastating ad highlighting her support of Obama's signature law.
Dear Mrs. Kelly, your family plan is no longer available under the Affordable Care Act.
Dear Ms. Davis, we can no longer offer you the same policy. Your doctor is no longer in the network due to the Affordable Care Act.
Due to the Affordable Care Act, your monthly premium has increased. No longer covered due to the Affordable Care Act.
Send Senator Landrieu a message. Obamacare is hurting Louisiana families.
but the point of all this is not to say that if you're in the news business, or whatever it is you can call what Fox News does, that you can't have a political opinion or support a specific ideology. This show has an obvious progressive bent, and we're not exactly shy about it. Pretty much everybody on here is a progressive, except for Sean.
Who is wrong.
But what you can't do in any good conscience while having these ties to an obvious political movement is to call yourself fair and balanced. I want to go to my panel and get your thoughts on this whole thing.
All right, so the big issue about this is the fact that they present themselves as newsmen, not the fact that groups like Americans for Prosperity want newsmen to come speak for them, because getting celebrity speakers is only like the most obvious thing you want to do if you want to promote a certain cause or whatever. The bad thing is, and it's especially true with their quote-unquote straight news people rather than their opinion people, even though they're all opinion people, is the idea that they go back after receiving this money, after receiving this material, and basically promote their agenda as news on TV. Like, it's one thing if you're John Stossel, who's probably an earnest libertarian, who's doing his libertarian stuff at ABC for a while, and people at ABC didn't like that, and you go and you work with this group, and then you come back and you're doing an obviously libertarian show, right? But if you're like Brett Baer or Tucker Carlson, kind of does straight news sometimes, but like, or supposedly does straight news, like it's, if you're like one of those guys, it's worse. But also, it's like it's still unethical journalistically that you're not saying, oh, I also take money from these guys that I'm presenting their studies. So it's bad, but it's not like the worst thing in the world, in my opinion, because like politicians speaking at these groups is much, much worse.
All right, Jordan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I guess my stance on this is a whole lot like it was on the IRS scandal. Like, okay, if the IRS is unfairly targeting groups, which we've covered, it wasn't. But even if it was, that's not the scandal. The scandal is that political groups can exist and people can give unlimited money to them and not have to disclose that. Sean has brought up some excellent points on the show in the past about, how Citizens United truly was a freedom of speech case that's just kind of gone horribly awry. But what we can, I think, all agree on, the fact that you can do this and influence elections, from behind a curtain and no one knows who you are, that's just ridiculous. And why this is problematic, maybe a little more so than I think Sean, gave it credit for, is that then, how much does this set the agenda? The fact that Fox News doesn't let the IRS scandal go, even though it's been debunked time and time again. Well, you see now that it's not just a matter of Republicans, shouting Benghazi or shouting IRS. It certainly is that. But here you see, Fox News has a business interest in that as well, because the people on Fox News are tied in with the organizations, who benefit from the manufactured IRS scandal. So it's there's definitely a nefarious aspect to it, and it's the whole thing, the interplay between, you lose honesty in media, you lose honesty in the politicians, like who's holding who accountable here, and that's really what bothers me about it.
Oh, and I just want to point out one thing about the super PAC. Is yes, they're going to raise and spend a lot of money, but what a lot of people don't realize is, of course, that money has an impact, and I'm not saying that it doesn't. But the politicians that have money in their own campaign, that has more of an impact, because news organizations actually give them a discount when they're buying ad time. Like these super PACs and all these other companies actually pay the full ad price. So like Mitt Romney's campaign, there was a story, I forgot where it was basically his super PAC was basically paying 9 times the amount for their ads than Barack Obama's campaign was, because campaigns got a discount. So the super PAC thing, it's bad, but it's not like 125 million. It's like you can counteract that with not a fraction of that, but a good chunk in percentage of that. You can counteract that super PAC money on TV because of the way the laws are written.
I just want to touch on the whole straight news aspect. The problem with Fox News is that the only difference between their straight news programs, and this is Shep Smith excluded from this, actually, because Shep Smith actually does straight news. It's kind of amazing because he's like the only one that does it on the channel. But the whole straight news angle is that for most shows, you can't tell the difference between commentary and what they're trying to present as fact. Like the only difference may be like a graphic. Other than that, you can't really tell. And that's problematic in itself.
I do want to do that thing I do to where I try to hold us accountable and fact check us. You pointed out that this one group has more money, more skin in the game than, I believe you totaled up. What were the all the Democratic organizations that you totaled up?
There were a mix of Democratic and Republican organizations. It was the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, National Republican Congressional Committee, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So they're spending this much projected in 2014. $125 million is what Americans for Prosperity will be spending, and that dwarfs all these other groups. And insiders who are familiar with Americans for Prosperity, according to this report, also said, yeah, it's a conservative estimate. We're probably going to spend more money.
Okay. So I'm glad that I had you clarify that, because I missed the fact that you included some Republican groups, because I was just wanting to point out, I thought that you just said that they had more than all these Democratic campaign funds combined, and I just wanted to say, well, they've also probably got more than the Republican campaign funds combined, because or at least previously, there were contribution limits. Obviously, we know that's not so much the case now. Yeah, so I'm glad you said that.
I do want to take issue at one point, Lo. You said Shepard Smith is a straight news guy. Shepard Smith gives his opinion all the time, and it's hilarious when he does. Because usually he's pissed off, and usually it's about like gay marriage or something like that. He's like, why don't you just grow up and move into the 21st century? Like the one guy on there, and like I don't want to pick like the best, like the tallest dwarf here. Chris Wallace gives good interviews on occasionally. Like he'll ask you tough questions. Like so there are like certain aspects of it, but in reality, it's all tilted toward a certain agenda. It's just sometimes you have people who break through, and they're like, nah, I don't like that.
Well, that's like I said, that's the exception and not the rule. And that's really what you point out, is because it really can't be the rule when you're supporting Americans for Prosperity or Americans for Prosperity is asking you to speak at all those different events, of course you're going to back up your friends. That's just how it works.